Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome back to Thought for the Day. It's Wednesday. I hope you're having a good week so far and that you're well and safe, and maybe you're starting to enjoy some of the things that we're allowed to enjoy in these last few weeks. So all this week, we wanted to just look at some of the guidelines the government has put on its website about COVID-19 and going forward and how we can remain safe and that kind of thing. And so there are 5 guidelines on the government website. The first 2 are stay at home, work from home. And each day we're taking one of them and we're just putting a spiritual slant on them and applying the spiritual element of that bit of advice might be for us as disciples of Jesus as we come out of lockdown and we begin to go into this brave new world. And so today's one is limit contact with people. So of course, one of the things the government have been encouraging us to do is to try not to see that many people. Stay at home, to work from home, to try and then only limit. So we've got very strict limits on who we can see. And of course, throughout COVID-19, one of the most horrendous, hardest parts of this have not been not us being able to see family members and close friends. And that's been really difficult. And there are many people that live alone, have been unable and maybe quite frightened to leave their houses, and so haven't had that regular human contact. And the Bible tells us that man, as in man and male and female, we're not meant to be alone. So God made Adam and Eve and the animals, and we're not meant to live lives in isolation. Of course, COVID-19 has made us isolated. But this piece of advice from the government is about limiting the spread of this disease. So we limit contact with people because if I've got it and I go near you, you may well catch it and then spread it and etc, etc, etc. But let's spiritualize that idea of limiting contact with people. And you might think, well, that's not right. We shouldn't be limiting our contact with anyone. We're Christians, we're followers of Jesus. We're supposed to be people who reach out to the whole world. And that's absolutely true. We're to go into all the earth and preach and proclaim the gospel. But the element I'm going to bring to this is about avoiding contact with people and situations that might cause you to sin. Psalm 1, the first psalm in the book of Psalms, gives us some very clear guidance in terms of spiritual health. It says, "Blessed is the one who does not walk in step with the wicked, or stand in the way that sinners take, or sit in the company of mockers, but whose delight is in the law of the Lord, and who meditates on his law day and night. That person is like a tree planted by streams of water, which yields its fruit in season, and whose leaf does not wither. Whatever they do prospers. Not so the wicked. They are like chaff that the wind blows away. Therefore the wicked will not stand in the judgment, nor sinners in the assembly of the righteous. For the Lord watches over the way of the righteous, but the way of the wicked leads to destruction." Note that the way of blessing in Psalm chapter 1 isn't to do with what you do, but more to do with what you don't do, first of all. It's the not sitting, standing, and being in the company of evil people. And actually what Psalm 1 is doing is saying to God's people, not everyone you meet is good. Not everybody you meet is going to bring out the best colour in you. Some people will seek to drag you down, entice you into sin, referring to them as the wicked. You've got to be the righteous. And so avoid those people. Avoid those situations that have that effect on you. Somebody once wrote, "The more I get to know people, the more I love my dog." And actually, sometimes we can be naive about life, can't we? We can assume that everybody's wonderful and everything is great the whole time. But actually, sometimes we need to be just a little bit more shrewd and understanding and wise and say, actually, not everything is good. And sometimes the best thing for me to do is to say that situation or even that relationship is causing me to sin. It's bringing me down. It's enticing me to move away from God and worship something else. So I'm going to limit contact with that person or that situation. And so this psalm, the blessing comes from what we don't do, but then it's about our attitude. So it talks of those blessed people being people that delight in the law of the Lord. Going forward, if we want that blessing and that healthy spirituality, we've got to be people that delight in the things of God, that search for the joy and the wonder and the majesty of the things God says. And in that same verse, verse 2, it's then about what we do. So it's what we don't do, our attitude, and then what we do that leads to blessing and spiritual health. And the second part of verse 2 talks of meditating. as in actively pondering and thinking and applying and praying through the Word of God and the words of God. And then just look at the blessings that come for the person that avoid those dark, enticing situations, who then actively have an attitude of enjoyment of the things of God, and then they meditate proactively on His Word. It says in verse 3, that person, that one I've just described, is like a tree planted by streams of water that yields its fruit in season and whose leaf does not wither. Whatever he does, whatever they do, prospers. And it's a really amazing thing. As the government says to us, limit contact with people in case you get this virus. God is saying to us, limit contact with those people that will entice you into the virus of sin and to fall away from me and to worship other gods who aren't gods at all and idols and to turn your back on me. Ignore them, run from them, because they will be no good for you. Recognize those situations and people exist and flee from them. This psalm goes on and gives us a pretty clear description of what happens to those people that might entice us to sin and move away from God, from verse 4 to 6. I've already read them to you. The Bible tells us that bad company corrupts good behaviour. We know that who we spend our time with affects who we become. You are what you eat. You are who you hang out with as well. Unless you're going on with that sense of mission to preach the gospel, take a look at who influences you and take steps to limit contact with those people. This is a great time to do that, perhaps. But as we leave lockdown, let's ask ourselves, let's ask God, Lord, where should my time be spent? Who should it not be spent with? What situations would you like me to avoid? So I want to be healthy in my spirituality. Something to think about. God bless, and I'll see you tomorrow.